Hello and welcome to the RPG Academy podcast. My name is Michael, and we are here tonight for Detention Live with special guest co-host Targrus. Before we get to Targrus,
Hello.
well, it's fine. We're going to start with...
Sorry.
No. I said it weird. It's my fault. But my regular co-host sitting to my virtual left is Chris. Chris, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
So Chris has not gotten the green screen that he ordered in, but it's on the way.
Yes, it is.
So soon he's going to have a cool virtual background like I do, even though mine is horribly sized and you can't really tell what it is. What it's supposed to be is the alt cover of the new Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Stand by, I got to ban someone, because no, I don't want to be famous. If I wanted to be famous, I'd be famous. Jackal.
Do you get that often?
Well, hello, Mythical Phoenix. Thank you, Tom, for doing that for me. So anyway, we're doing a giveaway. 600 followers. We're going to give away this alt cover copy of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It's the newest WotC hardback. It's actually really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And I want to give a shout out to Mumfrey, who's currently in chat, because he was the one who got me the copy that we're going to give away. Because I thought I had one locked down, and then my friendly local game store sent me a message like, oh, sorry, we oversold those. You don't get yours. After we'd already announced we were giving a copy away. So thank you very much, Mumfrey, for taking care of that. I really appreciate it. So now let's get to our special guest co-host, Targus. Targus is a longtime friend of the show, active on Discord, one of my favorite people to chat with. I've had a chance to play in a couple games with Targus. Targus, I think you got a chance to play in a couple games I've ran. This is your first time on the show, though, so welcome.
Thank you.
So for those who don't know you, give us a little bona fides. You're not necessarily a podcaster, but you're a long-term nerd and geek, and you play role-playing games. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
What?
That's really the main thing. By day, I'm a regular university IT guy. Then I play way too many RPGs, especially this past year without much else to do, really.
Yes, you ran a game of, was it Swords and Serpents for me?
Swords of Serpentine.
Okay, and that's the gumshoe, sort of fantasy gumshoe hack.
Yes.
You're also a big fan of 13th Age, I understand.
Very much so. It's my favorite flavor of D&D.
Nice. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight, because I think the monster you pick for Cryptozoology comes from there. Anything else you'd like to say before we get started?
Not really, no.
All right, well, we'll jump into the show. We got several people who are already hanging out with us. Thank you so much. Tom's here, Remy's here, Mumfrey's here, Mystical Phoenix is here. There's a couple other people that haven't jumped in chat. Lurkers are always welcome. Thank you very much for hanging out. We appreciate it. But we're going to start as we like to do here with what we call extracurricular. And this is where we just talk about what we've been up to lately. This could be books we've read, TV shows we're into, movies, CDs, songs, literally anything you want to share about your life with the strangers on the internet. Chris, I'll start with you, buddy. What you been up to?
Mostly work. Now that I'm fully staffed, getting people trained has been real fun. I'm actually really excited because for once I have a team that doesn't take the concept of, well, this is my job, that's your job. They come on with the attitude of, what do we need to do to get through today? It was very confusing for the first few days, and I had to actually ask myself if I was awake. But
right.
Now that I'm getting adjusted to it, it's fun. Other than that, Jupiter's Legacy. I really like that show on Netflix. It's a good spin on superheroes. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And then just some tabletop simulator with you and a few other people. Yeah. Until things lighten up again. And well, they are lightening up until they continue to lighten up. Not going too many places.
Though, something I'm going to touch on when it's my turn, I know someplace you're going to go, sort of. It's not really going anywhere, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Targus, why don't you go next and tell people what you've been up to?
Lately, RPG-wise, I've been mostly running, alternating on Tuesdays, Wicked Ones, which is a Forge in the Dark game, where the players are basically monsters running their own dungeon and dealing with the adventurers to try to ruin everything.
Nice.
It's actually a lot of fun. And then alternating with that, Godbound, which is an OSR game that's kind of like Exalted, but not quite.
Okay.
And then very recently, Biomutants just came out on video game-wise, and So far, I'm really liking it, but I'm only a couple hours in so far.
Okay, what was this called? Biomutants?
Yep. You basically play as an anthropomorphic Muppet in a sort of fantasy kung fu land.
Okay, well, that interests me. Yeah.
It's a very colorful post-apocalypse type setting.
Okay. And what system is that for? All the regulars, I assume, or is this like a
Pretty much all of them. I'm playing on Xbox, but I know it's also on PlayStation and PC as well.
All right. Very cool.
Interesting.
So I've been up to quite a few things since last we've gathered here. I ran a in-person playtest of Action 12 Cinema. For any people who thought you were going to go through a whole episode without me talking about Action 12 Cinema, you were wrong, and you should know better. Shame on yourself. So this was kind of interesting. So my wife set this up. My wife does not role play. She got her sister, my sister-in-law, who does not role play, to get two of her friends who are quote-unquote gamers, local to the area, because again, we've moved. We don't really know anybody here that much because we moved and then COVID hit. But I didn't really know what that meant. And we set up this in-person play test. So they came over, lovely people. We definitely hit it off. We're going to do more game nights with them, but they're not role players. Like that's not the type of gamers. They're very much more like laid back, very social games like Sushi Go, Pictionary or Telephone Pictionary. Those are the types of games that they play, which are great. I love those games too. So we played Hanabi to start with because I didn't want to go straight into my game, and then we played The Mind after, and they really liked the game. My wife, who doesn't play, liked the game a lot. My sister did quite a lot. Overall, it was a big hit, but I did learn quite a few things, sort of some assumptions that I had, because so far everyone who's played it has been role players. And, I could use a shorthand with them because they already know role-playing games. These people had no idea what any of this stuff was. So it was just like the way I explain it needed to get filtered a little differently. And not necessarily directly related, but maybe just prompted from the energy I got running that game and everyone having a good time and making me really big happy. On my walk this week, I just had this sort of like an epiphany for a slight modification to the game that's going to make a huge thematic difference. It doesn't really change the way the game works at all, but it's going to feel a lot different. I think it's going to feel a lot more tied to the theme, which is great. So I'm really riding high on Action 12 Cinema. I'm super excited about it. I'm getting ready to go on a vacation here in a few days for 2 full weeks. I've never done a 2-week vacation in my life. We're going to do one. I'm going to do a complete rewrite of the rules based on this new stuff, and I'm very, very excited about that. So Action 12 Cinema, definitely big part of what's going on with me right now. Still doing the Smallville fan cast. So I'm rewatching those episodes and taking notes. We've been playing some online games, Chris and I, as well as some other people. We've been playing a DC deck builder, the Co-op Crisis, or Rebirth. That's what we've been doing when you move things around. And then just running my kids everywhere. Jacob's in soccer and in baseball, and they're both in Odyssey of the Mind, and they both signed up for swim, which starts next week. So it's just a lot of running, a lot of doing this, that, and the other. But it's all fun stuff. I get to hang with my family, so really no complaints. And then the last big thing I'll mention is what I sort of hinted at clumsily with Chris, is we've decided we are, in fact, going to have a faculty retreat this year. We've talked to Jacob, who works at the hotel up in Michigan. We've got the room reserved. We're going to get a room rate. I think right now there's 5 of us that are going to go. So it's going to be much smaller than in years past. But I'm so excited about getting together with you doofuses and playing some games for a weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. And we are going to open it up to our VIP backers from the last 2 Academaniacs. I doubt anybody will go, but it'll be offered. We do have room limits, so we can't let everybody go if everyone did sign up. But I'm hoping maybe 1 or 2 more people will show up. But are you excited about that, Chris?
Absolutely. Now that everybody's gotten their shots and everybody's vaccinated, we can get together.
Yeah, and super exciting. But I'm still a little nervous. Things could go wrong, but I'm more excited than nervous, so I think it's the right decision. But I think that's plenty enough for me, so we will move on, and we're going to play our first improv game. And this improv game is called 10 Things. And this is the game where we prompt one another in turn to come up with a list of 10 things that match the prompt. The idea here of the game is immediacy is more important than accuracy. So 10 bad examples are actually better than 10 good examples if the bad examples come quicker. So Targus, you are our guest tonight. So would you like to go first, second, or third in terms of actually giving your list?
Second.
Okay. So Chris, how about you prompt me? I'll prompt Targus, and then Targus will close the loop and prompt you.
All right, perfect. Targus inspired me on this list just a second ago.
Okay.
So, Michael, give me 10 bad hair care products.
Oh, Gorilla Glue.
One.
In the news. Bag of lice.
2.
Shoe polish.
3.
Nair. Those old-timey rubber bands that like stretch and hurt when you put them in your hair and you can't ever get them out.
5.
A hairbrush made out of teeth.
6.
A comb made out of fingers.
7.
A dirty fingernail.
8.
Dirty water.
9.
Glass.
10.
10. Yay! Woo!
Yay.
That in fact was 10 things. Okay, Targrus, you, my friend, give me a list of, I'll make it 10 role-playing games that you would like to run.
Oh God, okay. D&D 4th edition.
1.
Pathfinder 2nd edition.
2.
Swords of the Serpentine.
3.
Promethean the Created.
4.
Scion.
5.
Adventures Dark and Deep.
6.
More 5th edition.
7.
Blades in the Dark.
8.
Band of Blades.
9.
Scum and Villainy.
10. Woohoo!
10.
That, in fact, was a list of 10
Yay.
things. All right, sir. Now, you're to close the loop and prompt Chris for his list, please.
We're back.
So apparently the stream never failed, so we are still live, just so you're aware.
Just random.
But it looks like we're all back, so thank you everyone in chat for putting up with this cluster F. My apologies. Again, the internet, just being the internet in Michael's world, that's about as good as we can get. So we managed to finish up the 10 Things game. So we were about to move into what we call used books, which is usually the sort of the meat and potatoes of the show. And this is where we're going to talk about a previous campaign that one of us played or ran, and we're going to try to mine that for some either do difference, things that went poorly that we want to try to avoid or learn from, or maybe some things that went really well, and we've tried to bring those into future games. So Targus, you are the guest tonight. What campaign would you like to talk about?
So a few years back, when I was getting some of my local friends into some RPGs for the first time, or some back RPGs, and they hadn't had a sort of a long hiatus, I started up a Ravenloft game using Myth and Magic for the rules. It was a lot of fun, and I kind of see there are kind of more or less 2 main ways you can run Ravenloft. You can either do it sort of a straight up horror, which I think is actually really hard to do in D&D, but can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can more or less have horror-themed adventures more so instead. Like it's more of trappings more so than actual scares. Because especially in recent editions of D&D, players are pretty competent. It's a little harder to actually put them in danger. And this game more ran that. I did it to where everyone got to make their character from whatever fantasy world they wanted, and we're pretty much ripped in and made a group in Ravenloft trying to band together and survive. They more or less had fun going from different domain to different domain, getting in and out of trouble, trying to find a way to escape Ravenloft. Which ultimately they did. And it's a game I would love to go back to because of that, because they kind of left them off right as they escaped. And especially with Van Richten's Guide coming out recently, Ravenloft is very much on my brain.
So, again, so trying to think about some things we can take away from that. So I agree with you, and that's one of the things we talked about a little bit in our review, is I think it's hard to scare higher level D&D characters because they have so many resources and powers and abilities that, I mean, you can certainly overwhelm them with something really more powerful, but I think in horror, one of the aspects that the building of dread works better when you're lower powered. So
Right.
do you think that's something just in general about horror? Like, is it possible to have a horror game if you're a superhero? Maybe it is. I just don't know that I know how to do it. I don't know that I have the skill set for that. So what are some of the ways that you use to make the game either dreadful or to compensate for having quote unquote D&D characters that are powerful but still feel like you're in a scary story?
I think it's harder to. I think it's a lot harder to do it. I'm not sure if I really do it well, but I kind of take a page from superheroes actually, in that if I can't put the players in danger, I'm at least going to put characters around them that they're attached to in danger.
Okay, always a good option, I think.
Which something I would probably do a little bit less of now is putting a lot is kind of dancing a lot of characters and taking characters that we're really attached to and putting them in danger routinely. Which is
I think we lost Targus again. I'm beginning to think it actually might not be my internet. I don't know, because the stream seems to be stable. So it's possible that it is Targus and not my stuff, but we will continue to carry on. So Chris, do you have any experience running horror type stories in D&D or other RPGs?
Quite a bit.
Okay.
I really like the horror genre. The biggest trick I've kind of learned in a way is to make the players have a feeling more that their characters could lose more than just their hit points in their life. Like the concept of your character could lose its soul tends to make characters less likely to jump into danger. It's not just about the health and the damage, make them really fearful of it. Or their actions could be damaging to somebody else. That's another part of it that I like to play on. Plus, I also like to just play on some of the stereotypic horror themes. I don't get real gory because gore is easy to do. Building up the suspense, I think, is a lot harder. And you have to be really big with your descriptions on things. You walk into the dark room. Well, it's not just a dark room. You've got to be really good at it's dark and dank and it smells like mold. And you have this feeling on the back of your neck that something's just not right. And then you step in the room and you smell the rot. What do? You have to be a lot more descriptive with horror. You can't just be like, you're in a dark room. What do you do? Because you don't set the tone. You don't set that feeling. You've got to really give them that creepy feeling as a player.
Okay. So. Now, I'm pretty sure both of you play Shadow of the Demon Lord, which is sort of like a horror fantasy game. I've played a few sessions, though I've always played it lower level, like even the starting 0 level, which again takes that power aspect away. Have either of you played that game at higher level and have any experience with keeping the horror feeling, even though again in that game you still have powerful characters that you want to touch on? Targrus, since you're here, we'll start with you.
All right. I've actually run 2 full-length Shadow of the Demon Lord campaigns, so from level 0 to 10. And while some character builds can end up being pretty competent, you start presented with a toolkit to make the world pretty dangerous and oppressive regardless.
Okay.
And going on with descriptions, it's really easy to reflavor monsters in that game in particular to be really, really nasty, gross, and otherwise make the players just sort of cringe encountering them. Yep. Like my games of that tended to rate to if I were to give them a rating, it'd be like hard R because I tend to go all in with making things gross.
Well, having had the chance to play a couple sessions with Rob himself, who is going to be a guest on Detention in the future, he seems to lean into the gross and the grotesque and the gore.
He really does.
To sort of compensate for, yes, your characters are powerful or more powerful than maybe your typical, horror story protagonists, but when they're being chased by just a truly revoltingly disgusting monster like that, But my fear, and what I even experienced, is that if you go overboard in those descriptions, it seems to turn the game to humorous than horror. Like, I think there's a line to walk where it gets to an absurd level, and you're going to die, because if you play in a game with Rob, you're pretty much going to die. But
I'm very well aware.
But it's funny, not horror at that point. I don't know that I have the talent to walk that line or not.
I think you just described the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie versus part 6 or whatever they're up to.
Yes.
It just gets comical.
Pretty much,
I agree with that. Higher levels with building that horror, I kind of like the higher levels because you can start bringing out some of the bigger, badder demons and stuff like that. You're not going to pull out a big demon at a low-level character. There's no incentive for the demon to go after a low-level character because they're not going to get any power from them. So they're not going to try to talk to them. And B, the players are just going to run. Oh my God, it's a bone demon. This is CR8 and we're 2. We're out of here. So it's nice to pull out some of those higher level creatures and play around with that. That's where I also start really tempting the players. That's where you're going to throw the devil in, or a devil, I should say, and try to convince them to start, hey, I'll give you this. In return, I just need you to do a favor for me. Well, you don't know what that favor is till later. And then you hit them with it, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just sold half my soul to the devil and the other half to a demon. Now they're going to fight over me, and I'm stuck in the middle. Those are interesting games to me.
Actually, close to how the start of my first Shadow Demon Lord campaign went. I gave them access to quick power, and one of the players really took advantage of it. And I was just keeping a tally of everything he was asking for. Like, okay, well, the demon has that now, and that now.
I think that's part of it too. Shadow the Demon Lord does it really well. You have corruption score in that game. You do bad things, your soul gets corrupted. You hit 9 corruption, your body cannot physically hold that much corruption anymore, and you die. That forces players to make better choices. It forces them to think about tough situations. It's the old, the movie Speed? Shoot the hostage.
Mm-hmm. Shoot the hostage.
Well, you shoot the hostage, and the DM might be like, okay, that's 1 point of corruption. Or do you take the chance to shoot the bad guy? Like, that can build a little more tension in the scene. Not most players are going to shoot the hostage and not worry about it. Or they're going to go, oh, I'm such and such character, I can pull this magic shot off. As a game master, that's where you have to make the decision. How much penalty do I want to give them? How much more difficult do I want to make it? Or do I let them succeed? It's the theme that you're trying to capture in that game is what you have to look at.
Yeah, and if it's a horror game, you're going to swing more towards the gritty awfulness. If it's heroic, you're going to be like, sure, you can make that shot. You're the hero.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quickly want to say thank you to Remy for actually gifting a sub. He gifted it specifically to Tom. So thank you, Tom, for subbing to the channel. But thank you, Remy Moore, for gifting that sub.
Nice.
So I think, and this is one of the things where, as a younger game master, whenever I tried to run a horror type of game, I was trying to freak out my players. And I do think there's still value in that. And I think that lends itself to specifically what Chris was saying earlier about the way you describe things and you lean into the unknown. But one of the things that I thought the Ravenloft book did pretty well is it talks about the game is about horror for the characters. And that goes to buy-in. I think Remy talked about that in chat a little bit earlier, is saying we're going to play a horror game. Your characters are going to be afraid. And I'm going to do my best to make you feel a little uncomfortable. I'm going to try to make you feel kind of scared at times. But it doesn't matter if I scare you or not. The idea is that our characters are going to be afraid. So one of my classic Michael techniques is to lean into the resourcing the table, and you can do things like you walk into a room and you see something truly terrifying, something that shakes you to your core. What is it? Like, I may not be able to come up with the most descriptive thing in the world, but what is it that your character's afraid of? Because that is what you see, something your character is afraid of, and then you let them supply you with nightmare fuel of this, that, or the other, and let them just describe what they see. And then again, you write those things down and go, okay, this is what terrified them. Then next time, maybe I do that description instead. There's some things in the Ravenloft book, and this isn't an advertisement for the book, but some things I think did well is you have fear seeds, which are kind of like phobias in a way, like you set up in advance things that your character would be afraid of. And it could be typical like spiders. It could be drowning. So in a game where water spiders are a thing, then maybe that's what brings out that fear seed to your character. And you play it off and say, okay, you said your character had a fear seed regarding drowning. You just had to dive into this old rickety well to save the child, which turns out to be a demon, not a kid anyways. So let's spend a few minutes talking about how your character feels right now. And I think that's, I think taking the time to let your character sit in these things that could be making them fearful is important. And it's something that I probably didn't do well as a younger DM.
I think we all have that problem.
Yeah.
Like everybody, when they think horror, wants to go extreme. Everybody wants to have the alien chest burster come out and spray everybody with blood, and you're like, "Hey, isn't that cool?" And everybody else is like, "It's kind of gross."
Or you want the jump scare, like it's like you're trying to set up because a lot of us movies are a media source that we're familiar with, and there's horror movies that we enjoy, and we're trying to emulate and duplicate a horror movie, and it's just a different medium. And I think if you're trying to set up the scare, again, there might be people who do it well, certainly people who can do it better than I can. But I think that's a misstep for most of us, is trying to set up a jump scare, because I don't think jump scares work well in D&D. Maybe other games, maybe they do. Maybe, again, I just don't do them well. But I've not done them well myself. So I try not to do that. I try to lean into the slow pacing and the dread of what we don't know yet and what might it be. And again, if you slow down, your players will start to fill in those gaps for you. Just like I've said many, many times, if you listen to what your players are saying and they're like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure that the mayor is actually the person behind everything," and then you steal that because it's better than what you had originally. If you slow the pacing down and start to build the dread, the players are going to say, "Oh my God, I think, is it this, is it that?" And then you just take whatever the best option was. Going back to, if anyone's listened or watched Stranger Things recently, that opening, I think, first or second episode where they're playing D&D and all the players are like, "Oh my God, it's the Demigorgon. Oh my God, it's the Demigorgon." So of course it was a Demigorgon, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know what kind of DM Michael is, but I bet that there might have been a couple options, and the Demigorgon was one of them. And because they were so afraid of the Demigorgon, that's the one they go with. Yeah, that's my thoughts as well.
Yeah. I've only successfully pulled off a jump scare a couple of times, and I did the same trick. They were, in the haunted mansion, and as they were going from room to room, I kept describing things a little slower and kept getting a little quieter. So the players kind of started leaning towards me. And then they get to the one room, and then I slammed my hand down on the table and said, "The door slammed shut." And they all, jumped up, and they all were like, "You." And I was like, see, I slowed it down. You leaned in. I wouldn't want to go to that well very often, because you never know when somebody's going to take a drink and it's going to end up in your face instead.
Yeah. Ruined your nice new table. Or your alt cover book lying there open gets Kool-Aid all over it.
Yeah, I agree, though, that building up that tension is the hardest part of horror. And it does take the right table.
I think it takes the right table. I think props, which I'm a fan of props, but I don't do them a whole lot. But I think horror specifically is the genre where props maybe can really shine. So the thing like having goblets of red Kool-Aid that, looks sort of like blood. Maybe turning the lights down a little bit lower than you normally would so that it is a little darker and the room that you're in maybe feels a little smaller. Maybe trying to use some music cues in the background, or just some like ambiance music, like a crow cawing in the background, or the sounds of like a storm, or even just like wind swept, like the sea pounding, the waves pounding on there can just sort of set a tone and a mood that might be a little harder to get to otherwise. I think those are fun, and I just think horror might be the genre to go for it. And you can even do the thing where like the foodie stuff And I know we got a couple people on the chat right now who are really good at cooking or into that, making like the finger foods that look like actual fingers, or like a cake that looks like a bloated face or a bloated body, which is gruesome but funny, but this kind of sets the mood for your players going in that maybe, your normal pizza might not do. But I don't know. To go back to Targus, so anything else you've done well or has been successful that you would advise people maybe who are trying to run horror games could do?
Actually, I want to I think I want to reiterate the buy-in's really a big deal. Like when I watch scary movies, my husband hates watching the movie because I will deliberately sort of let all my guard down. I kind of embrace being jump scared or having something creepy happen. And having that sort of attitude and buy-in as a player makes a big difference. Tapping that as a GM. I had a second thought, but it just walked away from me. I just want to mention the prop thing even. That's probably even beyond that a good idea. And just in that, for example, Chris Estrad was one of the earlier adventure paths for a 5e, and they make a big deal of the Taroka deck in it. Which, when I ran that with my players, we actually made a big to-do out of pulling the cards out and actually going ahead and rolling them out, pulling the cards, letting them see what's on the face of the card, know what kind of creepy thing that might turn into later. Kind of helps set the tension for what's coming up.
Mm-hmm. It's in the book. It's actually pretty cheap. To be honest, wasn't a big fan of it. But they have
the spirit board.
And the planchette, which it's basically a Ouija board, but it's the it's the Ravenloft themed one. That might be a fun prop to have at the table, to have the players use it, but it have some sort of reference in game. I don't particularly believe that those things actually do anything. I've never used one myself, so I can't say. But my understanding is it's whether purposeful or maybe subconscious. It's the people using the planchette board that kind of make it move. But, if you have everyone on board buying in, but you're playing this at the table, but what happens references the character, then it doesn't matter. You could have players who are moving things around, trying to create a bad situation that the players in turn will have to deal with. That's, to me, a pretty good marriage of metagaming to gaming, almost like a dread game sort of thing, where it's like what we're doing in the real world references and impacts the characters. Then great, let's maybe try that. So that could be a fun thing to use as well, as long as everyone is on board with that. Because I know some people actually do believe in those things and maybe might not want to use a spirit board, but as long as everyone's okay with it, if it's just good, harmless fun, then that's something else that I would advise maybe you try out as well. All right, so Chris, one more time, anything else, just general horror advice or examples or experiences you've had you want to talk about?
I just embrace it, have fun, do some research as well, and like you said, talk to your players. I will a lot of times ask them questions about how deep do they want to go in the horror versus mythology versus religion, because a lot of good horror can come from old religious text and stuff like that in stories. So I will use that a lot to my advantage as well, because that can be really creepy. Again, the angels and demons can be very creepy depending upon how you present them.
Mm-hmm. And I would just say again, make sure we're always keeping everybody safe. And I don't think Chris was not advocating that. So
tools,
this is not in response to that. It just sort of hit me that we want to play with our fears because it's fun. But when you're watching a movie, there's still a sense of safety that to Targus's point, I'm going to let my guard down. I'm going to enjoy these scares. But at the end of this movie, I can turn it off and I'm in my house, and I feel safe and protected with my animals and my husband or my spouse around me, whatever the case may be. But I don't ever want my players to feel any more uncomfortable than they sign up for. So just, be aware of that. Use your safety tools, use your check-ins. The point is to have fun, and it's fun to be scared, partly because we know that it's temporary. It's not truly something that's going to get us. All right. So with
Right.
that, we're going to move on. We're going to move into what is, for some reason, most people's favorite part of the game or the show. And this is the Where Have My Fingers Been game, where we are going to once again prompt each other in turn to act out a short scene involving 2 or maybe more characters that we will finger puppet through this short scene. Targus, once again, you are the guest tonight. So would you want to go first, second, or third in acting out the short scene?
I will go second again.
Okay, second again. This time, though, we will switch up the order. So I will prompt Chris first. Chris will then prompt you, and then you will prompt me to close the circle.
All right.
So, Chris, go ahead and sing the song.
Where have my fingers been? I said, where have my fingers been?
Your fingers are about to watch a scary movie.
Really? Another one? This is the third scary one that we've watched today. I love them. You'll love them. You'll learn to love them. Can I have your soul? What was that? Nothing at all. Just let's. This is my favorite movie. It's about the devil. What? It's about what? The devil. My dad. I mean, not my dad. I didn't say that. No. Just watch the movie, please. Okay. Is this where he gets eaten? No. Not yet. Can I have your soul? What? No. Nothing. Just watch the movie. I'm out of here. You're weird. And that's where my fingers have been.
Yay! Fantastic. All right, Chris, you will prompt Targus, please. But Targus, you have to start by singing the song for us.
Yes. All right. Where have my fingers been? Where have my fingers been?
Your first fencing lesson.
Okay, so I pick it up and I block, right? Yes. What? Yes. Shouldn't you be giving me a lesson or something? No, life is pain. You must fight. This is a beginner class. No. Horrible fencing instructor. 101.
You got through it. Yay.
Yep, fantastic. All right. And now, of course, Targus, you will prompt me. Where have my fingers been? I said, where have my fingers been?
All right. You are both lost in the library. You've been there for an hour now.
I feel like we've crossed this way before. I know what you mean, but it's kind of weird because, like, there's a big stack of books, and you turn around, there's a big stack of books, and there's the hallway, and there's a big stack of books. I know, but I've been paying attention, and I'm pretty sure that book is on Australian bird mating rituals, and I'm almost positive that I've seen that book before, but the last time it was on my left, and this time it's on my right. So I don't know that we're going in the right way, but now that I've marked that book, you really just want to read that book, don't you? I kind of do. I mean, we've been here for like an hour, but we came to the library to find a book on Australian bird mating rituals, and it's right there. Fine. Okay. Let's take 5 and let's just check that book out. And then, ooh, it is the spirit of the and that's where my fingers died of ghost scare.
Yay.
All right. So with that, we're going to move into cryptozoology. And this is the part of the show where we talk about a monster, usually from D&D, but not always. And we talk about some interesting ways we might have used that monster in the past. And we think about maybe brainstorm some ways that we could use this same monster in the future. Targus, you are the guest tonight, and you have brought us a monster I have never even heard of before, despite the fact that I have played and ran some 13th Age. So please tell everyone what monster we're going to talk about.
We are going to talk about the Koru Behemoths.
The Koru Behemoths. So what is this creature, this beast?
These are exceptionally large creatures. They're kind of ambiguously defined in 13th Age, because lots of things are ambiguously defined in 13th Age. They are basically somewhere between mountain and island sized. They migrate all around the Dragon Empire, which is sort of the default setting for 13th Age. And basically, they are their own sort of terrain and adventure location all on their own. So they're almost less monster and more force of nature / destination.
Interesting.
Hold on one second. I'm just throwing something in the chat. My my stream health like indicator just went from green to red. It looks like it's back to green now, so I think we're okay. But for a second there, I was worried that we were losing the stream. So basically, these are just like enormously large creatures. And, from D&D, I think of like dragon turtles is a thing. So are they on par with that? Bigger, smaller?
So, bigger. So for the 13th Age Druid, one of the character options is a terrain caster, which you get spells from the various sort of terrains, so caves, forests, mountains, that sort of thing. And Koru Behemoths are their own terrain. And in that book, they happen to include sort of a photo of the Koru Behemoth, but they have a Tarrasque beside it for scale. The Tarrasque is kind of, one of the quintessential giant D&D monsters, and it is basically about to be stepped on in the photo. So scale-wise, they are unbelievably big.
Isn't there, and you have to refresh my memory, it's been a while since I've read it. In 13th Age, don't they have a path that they followed?
They have a migratory path that covers a good chunk of the map. It also goes well off of it. But they've run along mountains, along deserts, along volcanoes, and across the ocean at one point.
Yeah, and wasn't there something to do with cities being built in the footprints of the behemoths?
There are cities on them, no cities on the actual path. In fact, in general, things tend to not live on the path because, every now and then a mountain comes by.
It'll be fine.
My initial thought here is this is probably not something that you try to hit with a stick till it dies. So have you used these creatures as an encounter in one of your games? And so how did you, was this something like a force of nature that has to be reckoned with? Or what was your thought process?
I've probably used them more as a location or in part a MacGuffin. My favorite use of them I've done in the game is I did a high-level one-shot with 13th Age where everyone got to make a 10th level character. They're all retired heroes coming out, dealing with a problem. In this case, it's going to be the last Tarrasque. And I posited that for this one-shot and this Take of the Dragon Empire, Tarrasque are actually parasitic life forms that grow inside of Koru Behemoths.
Interesting. I like
that. I had the players running around. So I had the players running around grabbing the MacGuffins they needed to try to fight a Tarrasque before it hatched inside of a behemoth's heart. And got to have the excuse of actually having the big final battle taking place in the actual giant heart of the behemoth itself.
That'd be unique because you'd feel the heartbeat, but it would be, I imagine, very slow.
Yeah, I basically had it as sort of a large open chamber full of fluid where at the bottom there was a little sort of Tarrasque growing. Little being very subjective there.
So yeah.
All right. So I'm going to assume, Chris, that you've never used one of these creatures before.
Nope.
But one, have you ever used anything in a Star Wars or any other game you've ran that is sort of comparable, like these really larger than life, massive, island-sized creatures? Leading into, do you have any ideas on how you could use something like that in a game?
I've never used one before, but I remember when I was playing 13th Age, we talked about having a whole adventure based in there, and what we were actually looking at doing was being traveling merchants. But the idea wasn't you were just playing one character, you were actually going to be playing a family, because they don't move very fast. So to go from city to city on the map can take time. So we were playing this whole adventure on the back of the behemoth. Or at least the idea was. We never actually played it, but you'd merchant there, go to one city, sell some cool wares. Then your children would be selling stuff in the next city was the idea.
Okay.
So it'd be a lot of time jumps.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was on the back of the behemoth, technology actually advances slower because there's not as much trade of information. So the idea is you get to a new city and all of a sudden there's people on these magical devices with these wheels that they can propel with their feet somehow, and your characters are all fascinated by this new technology. It was a neat idea. We never actually got around to it, but something we toyed around with.
That sounds fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a movie not too long ago. I think it was based on an IP. I'm not familiar with it. I think Peter Jackson did it about these giant cities that like moved, and I think that's. I heard it wasn't very good. I didn't see it, but sort of the idea of that too is you have these huge, massive creatures that are so large that you build your cities on them, or you build civil, settlements on them, that kind of thing. But I think, like my first initial thought with using something like this is like the very first time I used, I went to the ocean. I don't consider myself a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person, but I think the closest I ever came to a religious epiphany was the first time I saw the ocean, and I realized how inconsequential I was. Just standing there on the beach, seeing the massiveness of the ocean, and it just happened like it wasn't a crowded beach. I was pretty much there, like my parents were with me, but for the moment I sort of stepped forward. It was almost like it was just me facing the ocean, and I'm like, I'm meaningless. like my desires in this world mean nothing. So I kind of like translating that to this sort of the behemoth, that no matter what level our characters are, coming across a behemoth like this isn't anything other than, oh, I have no power to influence this creature. I'm at most a minor inconvenience. So I think the sort of classic idea is that something has changed their migration patterns, or something is changing, almost like climate change in sort of a way that if we don't fix this problem, these behemoths are going to start, they're going to move 13 miles to the west, and then you pull out your map and go, oh no, that destroys like 14 cities. There's millions of people in harm's way. So we've got to fix this problem so that, the behemoths aren't really, they're the inciting incident. They're the MacGuffin, as it were, to force the characters into doing another thing. That's probably cheating a little bit, but I do like the idea of having some sort of larger than life, in this case, truthfully, larger than life thing that is forcing the characters to do something else. And maybe even something that isn't necessarily like good. They're like having to do this other thing that's kind of bad, because not doing it would be worse in this particular case. I know I'm speaking kind of in circles there, but does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does. Okay, they're big. They're forces of nature, and you're beyond bug size to them.
Mm-hmm. And I also like to think, like, is there more to them than we realize? Do they serve a greater purpose? Is their movement tied to some other event that, maybe one of them dies of of old age as it's walking, and now you have literally a mountain that's not supposed to be there, but it is. It blocks trade routes. Again, I'm just thinking about that evergreen ship that blocked the Suez Canal for like a week. Like one of those, gets in a trade route and collapses, it's going to disrupt the flow of government and commerce. And 13th Age is probably a little bit more like advanced, but that could work. Or just it cropland or whatever the case, or just some like powerful wizard. He's like, it's on my lawn. I need you to move this. This dead thing's on my lawn. And so you're out trying to move, the Archmage yells at you because he wants to play golf and he can't. That's the first thing that comes to my mind about trying to use these creatures, because, hitting it with swords, I just don't think it's fun at all.
No, they're not really. They're kind of cheap because they're not really baddies you're in a fight. They're not statted out in any way, shape, or form in the books.
Mm-hmm.
I think the closest you get to that is they give you like some prompts for what I think 5 of them might be, and leave you to define what the rest might be. Which is really what 13th Age does in general with everything. They give you a few ideas and then ask you to go ahead and take it and run with it.
Yeah, which is one of the things that I do really enjoy about 13th Age. Obviously I like that system quite a lot. Is there anything about them having a language? Do they communicate with each other? Do they communicate outside of themselves? Like, is that something that's covered in any of the lore?
Not really. I think they could, not, at least not any that I read. The closest is that they definitely do give the idea that some of them do have personalities. Like, I think one of the example ones has devotees of the white dragon on its back, which in 13th Age, the white dragon's dead. It's one of the sort of sad things. The quintessential big white dragon's no longer in the world. And he has cultists that have colonized the back of this behemoth and are trying to sort of take over in worship and reverence. and lets you know that this behemoth does not mind them, apparently, but absolutely hates dragons. So any white dragons that attempt to help out actually get chased away. Which you can either, again, that's where we're prompt run with. You could say maybe, okay, these cultures are only here because they're all actually really scared of white dragons, and this is the only safe place to act cool and act like you like dragons, since the dragons won't mess with you.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from you, Chris? Any other ideas on how you might use something like this?
Oh, I was just thinking with what he just said, with the white dragons, you could have a sudden earthquake in your area, and it's just because a bunch of white dragons have decided to attack the behemoth, who's fighting back, and he's pounding his feet down on the ground, which is causing an earthquake. So now the players have to come up and help the behemoth fight off the white dragons and not get stomped on at the same time or get caught in an avalanche or whatever other obstacles you want to put in their way. Which 13th Age has got some good mechanics for dealing with that stuff.
Yeah. I think the last idea would also be sort of the opposite of, wanting to keep them from changing their route. Maybe you try to change their route to do a thing. Like there is a evil swamp, of necromancy. And you're like, you know what? If we could get this behemoth just to walk through it, that would solve all of our problems. Not realizing it would probably create more than that, but just like trying to find a way, whether it's, again, my thought now is that you dress up like a giant dragon, like a big paper mache dragon, and you get it to chase you so that it goes off its path, but then you get it back on the right path so you don't like destroy the entire ecosystem. But that could be a fun thing. Like, how do we get this behemoth just to go 1 mile to the left for like 3 miles and then go right back where it's supposed to be? And that could be really fun. It's all role play. There's like no mechanics behind. It's like, it's like the montage Little Rascal show. Just like, let's try this. And you have a little montage of them trying to act like a dragon. That didn't work. Yeah. And then you have this, just all the different crazy things they can try to do for one session. And then it works at the end but then it doesn't actually do what they thought it would do. And so the next session, you still got to go fight the Lich anyways. But that could be fun. I think that would be cool. All right. Targus, anything else from you?
I really hope my players don't actually hear that, because next time I run a game, they'll want to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for playing our reindeer games tonight. I really appreciate it. Sorry for anyone listening for our internet problems. It seems like we're okay now. This will be an audio-only release later, so if anyone, if it was too bad, maybe you can catch it there. But we like to end the show as we always do with our audience Q&A. We have several people hanging out with us, and chat's been pretty active. I really appreciate that. So if you have any questions for me, for Chris, for Targus, doesn't have to be role-play game related, but it kind of makes sense that it would be. We reserve the right not to answer any questions if they don't really fit into what we want to talk about. But for more or less, it's an open forum to ask anything you want. We'll try our best to talk about it. There's a little bit of a delay, maybe even more so tonight than usual. So while we're waiting for any lag to catch up, let's go around the room, tell everybody where they can find us if they want to interact with us on the internet. So Targus, you're our guest. Where can people find you if they want to chat with you online?
I do a lot of chatting on the RPG Academy Discord. I also hang out on the RPG Talk Discord, unrelated. And I'm Targus on Twitter as well, where I talk about basically all the various nerdy things I like in the world, and try to not despair too much about the world at the same time.
All right, and that is Targrus?
That is right. I spend most of my time pretending to be an orc on the internet.
Well, we all have to have hobbies, right? All right. And once again, thank you for joining us tonight. Chris, where can people find you?
Thank you.
Twitter's easiest, Burlew_Chris. I'm on a couple different Discords with RPG Academy or the Redemption, the other show I'm involved in. Otherwise, wave at me as you pass my house someday, which might be creepy.
Yeah, that would be a horror story.
Yeah.
All right. And then, of course, my name is Michael. Everything I do can be found at the RPG Academy, except for Farm to Fable, which is my Smallville Fancast Rewatch podcast, which is getting close to hitting season 3. So come find me at the RPG Academy on Twitter. And do consider joining our Discord. If you enjoy anything that we talked about here tonight, there's no monetary situation with people joining the Discord, but it truly is my favorite way to interact with people right now. Like I spend more time having, insightful conversations with people I enjoy talking to on Discord than anything else. I have more followers on Twitter But like I throw out a prompt and I might get 3 people to respond to it. But if I post something in Discord, I'm going to get not only am I going to get a response, but I'm going to get like a good response. It's not just someone else like trying to tag themselves or get something. It's just like they actually answer the questions. All right. So we have a question. Thank you very much, Remy, for asking oyster, penguin, or goldfish crackers on chili. And this is, if you were in the Discord, you know what this is about. So I guess, what is your favorite or the only true option if you have to pick oyster, penguin, or goldfish crackers to put on chili?
Goldfish.
Targus.
I've never heard of penguin crackers.
I've also never heard of penguin crackers, so I would go with oyster of those 3 because I don't know what
oyster
one of
is
them
the
is.
one I would go with, yeah.
All right, so us ignorant schlobs went with that one. Mumfrey99 also, or 999, sorry, asked a question specifically for Chris. Your Shadow of the Demon Lord actual play was really good. Any plans on getting back to that or a similar themed game?
Yes, we've played some since everything shut down. We're looking at it. It's just with the pandemic and the way life is right now, it's very hard for us to match schedules. What most people don't know is I'm in Michigan. Michael's an hour south of me, but Danny and John are on the East Coast. So sometimes it's hard to match up our schedules, but we are working at getting back to it. I would like to, because I really want to know what's going to happen with poor Terrell. I know where he's at now. And he's not in a good place. Of course, his goal of taking over everything is still in his mind, but we'll see.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you both for the questions. We'll wait just a couple more seconds. Again, if anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, we will sign off here and get back to our lives. So one more time, Targus, where can people find you online?
Targus on Twitter, TARGRUS.
Excellent. And Chris?
Twitter, Burlew_Chris.
Fantastic. So this show is Detention Live. It happens every other week on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. On the intermittent interval, whatever, the other Wednesdays, Tom, who's been hanging out with us in chat, I don't know if he's still here, runs a Ghosts of Saltmarsh game, though I've been told it's so far off book it really shouldn't be called that anymore. And they're going to try to play a full 1 to 20 campaign, and that book wasn't designed for it, so of course they were going to get off book eventually. And on the same weeks that we do this show, on Tuesdays, we usually run a 13th Age game called Shadow Spawns. Had to miss last night because of the family thing, so that's also every other week. And then I'm going on vacation starting June 4th for 2 weeks. So there's going to be a gap where there won't be any Detention or any Shadow Spawns, but we're going to pick right back up where we can. So no other questions came in, so I think we'll call it there. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. Targus, you especially for jumping in kind of last minute. Our regularly scheduled guest wasn't able to make it, and you volunteered. You did wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And
Thanks
Chris,
for having me.
as always, you're my stalwart co-host. Couldn't do this without you. So we will do the awkward wave out. Thanks, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks. Or 4, I guess, for me. Bye.